right, we are back for another episode of Under the Number. Today we're joined by Jacob Eason, former Georgia Bulldog, former Washington Husky, current NFL free agent quarterback. Jacob, thanks so much for jumping on.
Brian, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Let's just jump right into it. We talked about it before we got on the air here. We were the same class, high school, 2016 recruiting class, and you were a five-star recruit, the number one quarterback in the country. What kind of pressure comes along for a high school kid when you are holding that top spot, that number one quarterback spot?
Well, that's a great question. It's funny looking back on it now because, you talk about pressure. I actually didn't feel a ton of pressure when I was coming out. Mostly because of my family. My dad had been there before, not to the extent of the rankings and the recruiting and all that, but he was a former high school athlete that got recruited and went to college. My mom was pretty on top of it too in terms of just keeping me level-headed, always preaching, being humble and kind, and all that good stuff. But there was a lot of attention, and I was in a smaller town at the time, growing up, and a lot of that media was new for me and all the attention. So for me, I didn't necessarily feel pressure. I just felt a lot of eyes and a lot more than what I was used to. And as it kind of continued to go on, I got more and more comfortable with it. And the biggest thing for me was just trying to remain myself and just remain, my favorite thing, about growing up in Lake Stevens was playing football on Friday nights with those guys. So for me, the media and the attention and the recruiting was great. It was all part of my story, but my main focus was just hanging out and being there with those guys every Friday night and enjoying my time in the locker room and practicing throughout the week. It was great, and obviously, like you said, the pressure, as I got older and advanced in levels, it rose for sure. But in high school, it was more fun than anything.
So as a 15 or 16-year-old kid, you said grew up in a small town. That small town is Lake Stevens, Washington. How and when did you first get discovered? Were there coaches snooping around? Did you have other teammates who were attracting attention? Like, how did you actually jump onto the scene as a 15 or 16-year-old?
I think it probably had something to do with my 6'5" frame, and people say I have a pretty good arm. So I think that was the starting point for me. But really from there, my dad had me going at a really young age, working out with some private coaches and some trainers out there in Washington who were, former collegiate players, NFL guys, and guys who were connected in that realm. So as I started doing that in the off seasons, plus, playing more and more high school football and getting some tape out there, things started connecting. My first offer, actually, Steve Jervis was his name, was the guy I trained with originally. I'm trying to think when exactly. It would have been probably 8th, 9th freshman year of high school is when I started with Steve, and I would do his camps every Saturday, and we'd do some private stuff on the side. At the time, he was pretty well connected with Oregon State, so Oregon State ended up being my first ever offer after my sophomore year. And then once I got my first offer, things kind of started rolling after that. But yeah, just in terms of getting out there and getting recruited, I did a ton of camps. I did a ton of local showcases, which now there's a million of those. So for me, it was you never know who's watching. As a big kid, I had a strong arm. But yeah, just doing all those camps, doing all those showcases, and finding the right guys to train you to have the connections in the areas you need. Typically, all my offers would come in. I'd have a handful of phone calls with several different coaches and coordinators, and that's usually how it would go for me. Whether it was after a game or during the week, as they kept rolling in, it was usually over the phone.
Yeah, and so you said Oregon State, you have the connection through the quarterback coach, and a lot of guys say you get one offer and the floodgates kind of open. I think that's a pretty consistent theme with high caliber recruits anyway. Who were some of the initial big program offers that you had?
I got my first offer. It was my sophomore year. I remember I just had family dinner, and I went downstairs to take a shower, and my dad knocked on the door. He's like, "Hey, Steve Jervis is calling. He's got some news for you." Turns out Coach Jervis had called me, letting me know that Oregon State, him and Oregon State had talked, and they were going to offer me a scholarship. Then Oregon State followed up. And I think in that week, 2 days after Oregon State, I think Washington State had offered me. So that was a big one for me at home, the home state. I grew up north of Seattle, so I was more of a Husky guy, but having the hometown Cougs offer was awesome with Mike Leach in the air raid. That was really cool. Yeah. But then I think 2 or 3 days after that, Florida State, Jimbo Fisher called, and I think 2015 was their national championship year with Jim.
No, this is 2013 with Jameis.
Yeah, so it was freshly after that. Yeah, they had called, and I'm like, holy smokes, they just won the national championship. Jameis Winston, Heisman. So that was when I really realized, like, okay, this is legit. This is for real. And then I can't remember the exact timeline after Florida State, but after Florida State, it really just started getting crazy. Michigan, Notre Dame, Georgia, Bama, all these different big time offers. And it started getting really crazy, and it was a lot to process as a 15-year-old, because at that point I'd been to UW, and I'd been to Wazoo, I'd been to Oregon State, some local small camps, but I'd never been, east of the Mississippi and seen SEC football and all these big time schools that were offered me. So yes, it was really cool, but I don't think I was fully able to process what exactly was happening at the time. It just felt really cool.
Yeah, I'm sure it'd be impossible to process that when you're, when you're a sophomore in high school.
Right.
So one thing that I definitely talked to KJ about on his episode, very specific to the quarterback position in football, there can only be one on the field at a time, right? No matter what the scheme is, there's going to be one QB. So as a result, when you're a recruit and you're getting all these offers, and these major programs are also obviously offering the other top guys in the country from all across the country, because they will have, they'll be able to attract these guys. Geography won't really matter when you're that high caliber of a program. How much were you keeping your eye on commits and commitments that took place? And also, how much were you communicating directly, if at all, with your fellow recruits as time went on through high school to kind of understand tactically, strategically, where do I want to narrow this set of picks down to?
Right. That's actually a great question. So, yes, I did. I was absolutely keeping track of who was on roster already. And then obviously if there was another quarterback being recruited, I wasn't going to commit to a school with another high caliber guy in the same class. I did it a little bit differently than I think most people do nowadays, where I committed as a sophomore. And my idea there was, hey, I'm going to commit to Georgia as a sophomore before anybody else gets an opportunity to commit there, first of all. And then second of all, I was looking at the room that Georgia had already as who was their starting quarterback, who were their backups. At the time, they had a fifth-year guy who had transferred from Virginia. It was Grayson Lambert, Bryce Ramsey, Sam Vaughn. I think Faton Bada had gone by then. But there was a handful of great players, but there were guys that I felt like I could go in and compete with right away, and that was part of what I wanted to do. So that definitely had an effect to it. And then in terms of building the class around me, so I committed again as a sophomore, and with that, I was able to continue to go to Georgia camps during the next sophomore, junior, senior year, and I was able to help, my version of helping recruit that class that I knew I was going to go in with. So that 2016 Georgia class, I committed in 2015. By the time I got to school in 2016, I had already felt like I had personal connections with, 6, 7, 8 of those guys that I was going in with. 3 of them I lived with in my freshman year. So it was great. And it was very comforting knowing that I was going from Washington State in high school to go to University of Georgia, which was thousands of miles away in a completely new environment for me. But it was awesome knowing that I had 8, 9, 10 guys that I felt like I had already had 3 years of, communication and a relationship with. So yeah, I think, committing early helped with that. And obviously when you're going through the recruiting process, all those pieces are factors. Like another point to that, like University of Washington was a big school of interest for me being in my backyard. But in 2016, Jake Browning was lighting the world on fire and setting all types of records at UW. So that wasn't necessarily the perfect location. And he's a year older. So it wasn't a perfect spot for me knowing, hey, this guy's killing it. Yes, I would love to go here, and yes, I would love to compete, but realistically, it's like I want to go to a spot where I'm going to have a good shot at competing for a job early. And so it ended up being UGA.
So you mentioned that when you were getting those first offers, you knew what Wazoo was like. You'd been on the UW campus, but you didn't know what, the SEC universe was like yet. You end up committing, still as a sophomore. Is it safe to assume you went and visited Georgia prior to that commitment? And what
I
was that
did.
visit like?
I actually committed at Dog Night in 2015. It was the end of my first trip. So I had Georgia had done a great job. It was Mark Richt and Mike Bobo, previous to Kirby Smart and Jim Chaney, who I played for. But Mark Richt, Coach Richt, and Coach Bobo did an outstanding job of calling me once, twice a week, texting, whatever it was. We were always in communication, checking back in after games my sophomore year. So we built up that relationship, and then I committed to going to Dog Night over the summer of, I think it was the summer going into my sophomore year or after my sophomore year. I can't remember exactly, but I did the 3-day camp. I got the full, I was hosted by a recruit or a player, and I did the whole, check out the town, check out the campus, did the Dog Night camp, which was awesome. A ton of those guys that I committed with were there, and I was throwing to them in routes on air and 7-on-7, so it was really cool. And then the third night, we did basically a recruit dinner upstairs in the press box at the stadium. And I remember me and Ben Cleveland, I was texting him at the table, Big Ben, Big Country, we called him at the time. He's still playing up in Baltimore. I was like, hey, let's do this. Like, I'm ready. Are you ready? Like, let's make this commitment. So, before I could even, I felt like I sent the text, but not 2 seconds later, Ben's, ding, 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 stands up. He said, hey, in front of Mark Rick, Bobo, the entire staff, a bunch of boosters and my family, his family, a bunch of recruits. Ben stood up. I stood up. He said, I don't remember what exactly he said. It was an awesome moment, but he said, me and Jacob would like to make a, verbal commitment to the University of Georgia. And from there on, it was, I was locked in. I didn't want to be a guy that wavered. And obviously there's a lot of stuff that we'll get into that went on after that. But yeah, that night was just a perfect ending to a great trip. And I felt comfortable and confident that Georgia's the place I wanted to go. And so we made that decision and rolled with it.
I want to know, you make this verbal commitment. SEC fans, all SEC fans and Georgia fans in particular are known for being as passionate as they come. What was that welcome like, whether it was stuff on Twitter or people blowing up your phone or Instagram? Like, what went down in the weeks following that big commitment?
I had gotten a little bit of an idea of how intense the Georgia fan base was through recruiting previous to commitment. Whether it was, like you're saying, Instagram comments, just tweets at me, or whatever edits. Those were a big thing back in the day. And it was crazy because it was all new at this point. I mean, I'd been on social media, but it wasn't like Twitter was, still on the rise. Instagram was becoming its own thing, and I think I got like, I don't even know, 100,000 followers in like 2 weeks, and they were all Atlanta-based Georgia fans after the commitment, which was insane. It just goes to show how much they love football and how much how passionate they, like you're saying. I always say it's like, going to Georgia football game is like going to church on a Sunday for those people down there. It's truly is. It's one of the best environments you can possibly play in. It's unreal. So yeah, I definitely felt that. I felt like, very, very extremely welcomed. I knew it was a challenging, an opportunity as well as it was a challenge going into it. So, as you mentioned pressure before, you make your commitment, you're having fun playing high school football with your buddies that you grew up with, and then you realize, hey, I committed to Georgia. You see all this attention and all this notoriety. That's where the pressure starts kind of creeping in. So there were elements of that, but I loved it. I mean, they're passionate as it gets, and rightfully so. Look what they've done the last few years.
Did you feel kind of like you explained why you wanted to commit early, and that makes a ton of sense. Did you feel like also, now that I'm committed, I can just be super present and in the moment at Lake Stevens High School playing my high school football career?
Absolutely. That's part of the reason I felt comfortable and wanted to commit early. Had I not felt comfortable, I wouldn't have committed, but I felt comfortable enough that this is the place that I wanted to go. And once I got that done, it was now, back to my junior year, back to my senior year. Still getting recruited, and things can happen as they did. But again, the focus was always on, hey, let's go win a state title, and whether that was football, baseball, or basketball. So, I love, obviously the recruiting thing was awesome, and it put me on the map. But my mindset in high school, I was always just one of the guys, and then I loved being a part of that squad.
So I want to hear, of course, in your own words, how some things did shuffle around in between that commitment and your first season on campus. In between that time period, though, how much were other coaches, other fan bases, I'm sure, but how much were other coaches and recruiters still just really trying to get your attention or trying to say, hey, don't quit on us yet. We're still going to give it our best go until the day you step on campus. We will continue recruiting our asses off to get you to come to our school instead of going to Georgia.
Absolutely, yeah. There was, I mean, the recruiting never stopped once I made a commitment. There was still offers rolling in, and coaches, making their recruiting cases. I remember meeting Harbaugh. He came to a basketball game in my junior year, so I was still committed to Georgia, but he came through, and that was a huge deal for Lake Stevens High School. That doesn't happen very often, so that was cool. McElwain came through there at the University of Florida. And there was a ton of high caliber guys and recruiters that came through there. So it was still really cool to make those connections. There's still randomly I'll chat with a couple of those guys here and there, from those relationships we made back in the day. So the recruitment definitely didn't stop, but it was more me understanding and knowing, hey, I'm pretty solid on Georgia, so I didn't have to spend as much time critically thinking and focusing on the things outside of just being the high school quarterback and focusing on that. So my high school coach Tom Try did a great job of helping me out with that, as well as our athletic director. My dad, obviously, my mom was heavily involved. My family was great throughout the whole process, brother and sister as well. There was a lot going on, but I had a great staff around me and myself. I felt like I had a good head on my shoulders, so it was a smooth operation amongst a lot of the craziness.
And so obviously you've been long committed, but when your timeline to take an official visit did come around, I assume you still took it just as a means of helping with the recruiting effort and bonding with some of the guys and taking full advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. I did. So at that time, I was fully committed. That was a crazy trip. I just kind of reassured, hey, this is where I'm going. I remember I got hosted by a cat named Ryan Rankin. He was one of the well-known linebackers on the squad at the time, and we ended up having a few great nights and hanging out with some of the guys already on the team, and as well as some of the guys that were getting recruited in my class. So yeah, I had my recruiting hat on as well at that point. Guys like Cole Hardman, Isaac Nada, some studs were around me, and Charlie Warner, another one of those guys that came in with me. So yeah, I was getting recruited, and I was enjoying myself, but at the same time, like, hey, dude, like, let's do this thing. Let's make 2016 our year. And no, so the recruiting process was fun. The official visit was a blast. And yeah, basically just reassured everything that I thought I already knew.
Without getting yourself in too much trouble, tell us a little bit about an official visit to Georgia. Athens famously had the most bars per capita than any other city in America. It's pretty conducive to having a good official weekend.
Yeah, without getting in too much trouble, you can imagine what a 17-year-old would get into in Athens, Georgia. No, it was outstanding. An incredible place to go to school. I always love going back there too, even now, just, catching up with some of the people that I used to hang out with and everything. The recruiting trip, I mean, they're all pretty standard. It's basically you get the hosts get a little bit of cash to take care of the recruit. Usually find yourself going and, shooting pool somewhere, right? And going and hanging out, grabbing a nice bite. There was a 5 Bar was like the local recruitment spot down there in Athens. They had an incredible uptown shrimp if you ever find yourself down there. And then, yeah, just hanging out with some of the guys on the squad currently, maybe catching a night out. And then maybe, yeah, maybe if it's in the cards for the night. Yeah. So I won't go into too much detail, but I had a great time on my official visit, and I think we'll leave it at that for now.
Fair enough. So talk a little bit though, I assume this was between that visit and you actually going to campus. There's a coaching shakeup, things change. Talk to people about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that came I can't remember what year that was. That 20. I know Kirby's first year was 2016, so I'm imagining 2015 was when
Did you
Coach Rick
enroll
got.
early? Did you enroll
I
early?
did. I did. So I ended up like recommitting, I think a couple, like not even maybe a month or two before I went and enrolled. I think it was during my senior season, the news came out that Mark Rick was getting fired and Kirby was getting hired. And I never decommitted. I think that was out there. I never made an official decommitment from Georgia. I wanted to see out the hiring process. I'd been committed for 2 years. A lot of the guys that I had committed with were still committed as well. So that happened, and I remember being a little bit rattled. I did end up taking an official to Florida and Washington because of that, because I wanted to see some other options while they were figuring out, hey, we got to get our new head coach in there. I was still committed while I did those. I just wanted to make sure I was checking all the boxes and seeing if there's anything else out there. But once they hired Kirby, I think I don't know how many days he was officially the head coach before he flew from Atlanta to Washington and came and sat down with me and my parents on like a Thursday night in our living room in Lake Stevens, and that was really all I needed was obviously Kirby Smart's one hell of a football coach, and he came in there, met my parents, gave them his pitch, and gave me his pitch, and from there I never really never really wavered. Kirby came in there and sold it just the same way Mark Rick did, and more. So I was committed more so to the school, the University of Georgia at the time, than I was any particular person. Obviously, Mark Rick and Bubba were a huge part of that, and so was Kirby and Jim Chaney. But I didn't really want to waver on that. I made a decision, and obviously the coaching changes can affect that, but still, committed to the school and wanted to stick it through. So there was a little bit of uncertainty, but at the end of the day, I felt like in my heart that's where I wanted to go, and so I stuck with it.
So talk a little bit about that period where you're the early enrollee on campus. Maybe I don't know your exact birthday, but you probably just turned 18. It's you're still kind of a young kid, and all of a sudden things get very real.
Yeah, it was a lot. There was a lot going on. It was a completely new environment for me. I grew up in Seattle. I'd taken some trips, obviously, but from early enrolling, I remember. I think I was 17. I didn't turn 18 until November of my freshman year, so I think that was in season. But yeah, I don't remember how long I was there. I got there January 1. I'm not sure when spring ball started up, but at the time they were building the indoor facility, so we were busing to practice. And I was in study hall at 6 a.m. I was doing, the tutoring thing was new for me. I was pretty good at school, so I never had that, but the whole college experience was new. So managing my class time, my study time, and now understanding that learning a new offense, getting with the coaches. I'd never taken a snap under center since Pop Warner football, so that was a new thing. There was a lot there. And then the overall intensity and the practice tempo, I remember just being an initial shock for me. But once you're in it, and there's really no backing down. That's kind of how I am. Like, obviously learning a lot on the fly, making a lot of mistakes, but learning how to overcome those mistakes and not make them twice was a big thing. But they did a great job of kind of controlling the chaos and making, hey, here's the main focus, here's what we're doing. They structured it very well. As a 17-year-old, you're going in there as a big old recruit. You got to maybe your ego's a little big. They do a good job of de-recruiting. They do a good job of getting you in your routine. They do a good job of making sure you're focused on the right things and yeah, it was a whirlwind, but my first few months at Georgia were blasts, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
I always ask guys, who were some of the faces in your locker room who were upperclassmen where you can't help but kind of be in awe of these people? I know Nick Chubb was on the roster as an example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was my freshman year. I mean, Nick Chubb was Nick Chubb. Obviously, we know Nick Chubb has who he is now, but I mean, freshman and sophomore Nick Chubb was an insane, a crazy athlete.
He was built the same in high school as he is now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So guys like Nick Chubb at the time. We had Sony Michel, Lorenzo Carter was at defensive end. We had a guy named Davin Bellamy. Roquan Smith sat across from me in the locker room. Isaiah McKenzie was one of our slot receivers at the time. Riley Ridley was a beast. Trying to think upperclassmen that were there. Big John Atkins at nose guard. We had some high caliber guys in that room that, you know, it's like it's different now looking back on it. I can't remember exactly how I felt, but yeah, there's definitely some reservations, some little bit of shine. It's like, holy smokes, that's Nick Chubb. That's like the best running back in college football, and now I'm on his team. So a lot of that actually that reservedness translated because I wasn't the biggest. I'm a big guy, but I was never the strongest guy. I remember, our first week of workouts at the University of Georgia. I'm watching Nick Chubb over there squat the house, and then here's me over putting up 125. Getting my butt down to the medicine ball. It's just like it's crazy. It's almost like how are we on the same team? And but at the end of the day, Nick was an awesome help for me and an awesome person to be around. He was really one of the people that truly showed me what hard work is, not even by telling me, just by just coming in and working every single day. He's a workhorse. And, they recruited guys like that and they came to work and that's why they're winning a ton of games now. So, the initial shock of just being in a locker room like that, it was a lot, but obviously as time goes on, those relationships mature and you play together and realize, hey, we're all out here just playing a kid's game. It's really cool. So, it was a hell of experience, that freshman year, 2016.
So you talked about how the football program did a nice job of controlling the chaos around the program at that time. How much does the football offices, whether it's coaches or kind of football administrators type people, how much do they drill into players or have to kind of put up guardrails to prevent 100 young guys from getting into a bunch of trouble in a place like Athens? Because it's just inevitable. That's really hard. That's an impossible job.
That's a great question. I still don't know how they do it, because 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, right, going into the Athens, as you mentioned, 96 bars and a 6-block radius. Like, there is a lot going on, and there's a lot of fun and enticing things outside of the football building that, and they don't have their eyes on you 24/7. And so it's a great question. I could take my hat off to the compliance office and the guys upstairs in the Buttsmere building because every year, they're on their P's and Q's taking care of those guys. But I also, it also speaks to Kirby Smart and that staff, and their message and it's very clear. They bring guys in there. Obviously, the academics are what they are, but they got a goal of winning national championships and putting guys in the NFL. And I think that's the main thing. And I think he's pretty much instilled that. So, all the other stuff, obviously you're a college kid and you're going to experience it, but I think Kirby's done a great job of kind of making that the main focus. And he's also got a lot of good people in that building that also push that message as well and help out some of the players when some bad things happen. So, that's the thing, you always live and learn and hopefully sometimes hopefully the mistakes aren't as big as they can be. But they got all the things in the right spots to help guys succeed over there.
So we get to fall 2016. You're a true freshman. You ultimately, obviously, you end up getting on with the field. Talk about that camp, that August leading up. Obviously, you're learning on the fly. You did have the benefit of enrolling early. That obviously helped. But just talk about fall 2016 and the highs and lows that came with that. There's one specific moment I want to ask you about, but I'll let you talk through it first.
Yeah, so I remember busting out to spring practice every day. Just a kid from Washington, the humidity was a huge factor. I remember swapping out wristbands multiple times every practice because my hands were just soaked, from whether it was me sweating or the center's butt getting under center. I talked about that before. I'd never been under center, so that was a whole new thing. Just, much less figuring out how to learn a new offense, but just taking a snap under center was foreign to me. So, and then I got to get that snap and transfer it to Nick Chubb. I'm not trying to mess that up. So there was a lot going on in my head. But I spent a lot of time with Jesse and and Jim Chaney understanding and trying to learn that offense. And then, even as a freshman, I understand basic defenses and, and coverages and all that. But when you get to that next level, obviously you played, there's different terminology. There's a lot more pictures. There's a lot less basic, obviously, in the high school level. So mastering the offense, taking snaps under center, kind of finding my role as a leader, as a young leader on that team, and also competing with three other quarterbacks too. There was a lot going on, but at the end of the day, I was in it. So there was no, like I mentioned before, there was no turning back. There was no left, right, easy way out. I attacked it. Did I do it perfectly? I don't think so. No, absolutely not. But I learned a lot. I made mistakes, and I learned from those mistakes. And ultimately, it's helped me propel me to where I am today. But yeah, it was long, hot days. I remember going into training camp as well. The indoor, like I said, the indoor was being built. We were outside in the heat and just sweating together, grinding together. But by the end of camp, I had finally gotten to a point where I was comfortable with the offense. Comfortable taking snaps under centers. I was kind of playing the way I knew I could. There was obviously a long ways to go as a freshman and playing in the SEC, but heading into that season, I didn't really know what to expect. I knew I was competing for a job. That was always part of the talk. I don't think Kirby had announced anything, going into week one. When we played North Carolina in the old Atlanta Dome. But I just remember hey, if I get my opportunity, I'm going to go in and attack it. And, that's kind of the approach I had. So there's a lot going on in a young 17-year-old's mind, but for me, I think it was everything I needed in that moment.
And so you did get on the field in that North Carolina game.
Mm-hmm.
What was going through your head when your number was called and it was time to jog out there and get after it?
Yeah, I remember I was on the headset. Grayson started the game. I can't remember what me and Kirby had talked the night before, several times in leading up to the game, because I can't remember what the exact plan for the game was. I had a hunch that I was going to get to play at some point, so I was ready. I felt like, hey, if my number's called, I'm going in there. I'm not looking back, right? And I think that's kind of the approach for everybody. But it was I don't know if it was the first or the second quarter. I think we were down 7-3 or something, and I remember I was on the headset. Kirby was talking to Jim Chaney while our offense was on the field. I think maybe it was a transition. We'd gone 3-and-out or something, and he said, "Hey, tell the kid to warm up or get the kid loose or something like that." And I was like, "I know he's talking about me, so I'm going in." Snap the headset off, strap the helmet on, and I don't know if it was the next year's or when I went out there, but that feeling is something I'll never forget. I ran out there and the whole Atlanta Dome was clapping, yelling my name, and I felt like that's why you play the game, just going out there and that feeling, that's a feeling you always chase. And I remember going in there, and there was a lot of nerves and a lot of maybe anxiety and a lot of just unknown unfamiliarity. But then once that ball was snapped, it was just we're playing ball, so really cool experience to be able to play in my first game ever in college, and against Mitch Trubisky and Switzer and the North Carolina Tar Heels. That's something I'll never forget. Such a cool moment for me.
So what's the conversation like with Kirby that next week?
I think I can't remember exactly what we talked about, but I knew I started week 2 on. We played Nicholls State. I played well enough in the first game. Yeah, I made some mistakes. I don't know what I threw. I threw a couple touchdowns. My first touchdown was a little shovel pass to Isaiah McKenzie, but it counted as a forward pass, so I got that one under the belt.
A little shovel fly sweep, get it on the stat.
Yeah, exactly. But exactly. I think Kirby had. I don't know if he said something to the team or to me, but I think I moved on as a starter from there, and from there I was getting more stuff scripted towards me in practice, and we were rolling. So I started every game after that. Grayson was also a tremendous help at the time. Just he wasn't a selfish guy. He wasn't a me guy. So anything I ever needed, and he's a vet in that room for me as a freshman, and the rest was history from there. It was a lot of craziness, but it was a great experience to be able to start in the SEC as a true freshman. A lot of learning, a lot of growth, but again, wouldn't change it for the world.
So what's it like when you're walking around campus as the true freshman starter at UGA, just trying to go to class, and everyone knows you're now the guy?
Yeah, I didn't help myself out there very much. I had long hair at the time. I was sitting at about 255, you know. So I was pretty like, there's a lot of eyes on me. Not, I can I consider myself a humble guy, and I don't typically talk about myself in this way. But yeah, I noticed the eyes, everywhere I went. There was pictures taken whether I went out or had a dinner or going, just like you're saying, going to class. So I definitely had to have my wit about me and make sure I was keeping it collected and all that stuff. Not that I wouldn't, but it was definitely new. It was new. And that just kind of speaks to the SEC and the state of Georgia and how passionate they are about ball. And so I felt every bit of that. I felt that I had to grow up pretty quick, being 17 and a lot of eyes on me. Yeah, it's funny. I'd sit in summer class, speaking all the eyes on me. It was so friggin' hot. I'd be wearing shorts, and every time I get up from class, because I knew people knew who I was. It's like I wasn't going to leave my butt mark on the seat, right? Like, so I had to, wipe the sweat off before I got out of class. Yeah, stuff like that. You don't ever think about as a person who's nobody's watching, but once you got eyes on you, yeah, you got to do all the little things.
You can't get exposed.
No campus.
You can't get exposed to your swamp ass when you're QB1.
Exactly. No campus Snapchat stories. I'm not trying to end up on Barstool.
Yeah, seriously. Speaking of ending up on Barstool, though, honestly, I also wonder, like, when you're at a big school like that, and like you said, people are taking pictures of you. Are you having to be that careful to where it's like, God, I'm not going to have a beer in my hand at any time here because someone's going to freaking post me?
Yeah, I was careful with it, but I wasn't. I guess I wasn't overly careful because there was definitely times where I was underage with a beer in my hand. But that's part of the learning experience, and we had people upstairs in the office that were doing a good job of, hey, let's not let's limit that, keep your wits about you. The thing for me was like I don't consider myself an angry or mean or rude person. But there was a couple situations where it's like, I was in a situation where hanging out with some teammates, maybe having a couple beers. I'm not looking to, take a photo or a video with you right now. And, that can lead to some dicey conversations where some, people you don't know may think something about you and then things are said. So there was a little bit of that, but, that's all part of it. That's all part of that learning, experience. And then you figure out how to handle those situations better. So, there was a lot of eyes on me and whatever, but again, wouldn't change anything. I think it helped shape me and to who I am right now. And it was an awesome learning experience. And it also definitely had a lot of benefits to it too. So, yeah.
So one specific moment from that season that I'm sure is a bit painful, but also I would guess is probably pretty vivid, unless you blocked it out of your memory, is Tennessee comes UGA at home. Game comes down to the absolute wire. You make one of the most ridiculous throws with 10 seconds left to go up, 31-28. I mean, literally, it's you're launching it from the logo, middle of the field, in between the hashes on the 50, and it's on a line. Riley Ridley catches it in the end zone at the pylon. So this is like a 60-yard dot. Absolutely insane. I can't imagine how loud it would have been in there. And people who tuned in know how the story ends. Is it Josh Dobbs?
It was Josh Dobbs to Juwan Jennings, who I later played with in San Francisco. So 5 years later, still wasn't hearing the end of it.
So Josh Dobbs throws a Hail Mary to Juwan Jennings with no time left. Tennessee wins the game. Tell us about that, because that's, sad, dramatic. That's wild.
Yeah, talk about good nights in Athens. That was about to be probably my best night I've ever had, right? But no, that was probably the biggest high to the lowest low. Obviously, Georgia Tennessee, rich historical rivalry, SEC matchup. Yeah, I remember specifically we were up in that game earlier in the fourth quarter, and I got sack fumbled in the end zone and gave up the lead. This was right before that drive where there was 2 minutes or something left, and we drove down the field and ended up scoring. When I got sacked from the end zone and gave up the lead, I was like, okay, this reality struck me in the face right there. I knew there was something. I was getting the ball again, and I was going to go get that thing in the end zone. Like, that was my mindset. Like, I'm not losing this game in that fashion on our home turf, right? Like, that's not happening. So we got the ball back. We had a great game, great drive set up. Hit a couple dinks and dunks. Hit Terry Godwin over the middle, Jed Blazevich on the sideline to get to the middle of the field there. I can't remember what the down and distance was, but the clock, the ref had held up the center for a second. Cablano was our center. So I remember, I want to say there was split safety. They were in cover 2 or cover 4, but the safety on the left was not getting off the hash. And I know we just called double verticals and a seam. So it wasn't even a Hail Mary that we called, but for whatever reason, I noticed that the safety wasn't getting off the hash. I hadn't thrown a go ball yet in that game to the left side, so it wasn't like this was a game plan thing. This is where you're going with the ball. I remember getting the snap, stepping up in the pocket. Safety was still on the hash, and I remember seeing the left corner slow down and kind of looking back at me, and Riley was just taking off. He put his hand up. So, yeah, I claim that as my best throw I've ever made. I ripped it up the sideline, hit him right in stride over the corner before the safety, and that was the loudest I had ever heard Sanford Stadium. I remember watching the replay, and like the audio on the TV copy like goes out. It goes silent because it's so loud. I kind of blacked out. I jumped on, I think it was who the hell did I jump on? One of our linemen and celebrate and ran down there. But the problem was, so did our whole entire sideline. So we got 15 yards on the kickoff, which put them at half field, unforced from that penalty. And 2 plays later, Josh Dobbs to Juwan Jennings. It's like I was at the highest moment of my life, like feeling wise. That was, again, I'm humble, but that was the coolest thing I've ever done in front of a lot of people. And to see that pass go up in the air, to see Juwan climb the ladder, catch it over Lorenzo, that was just, talk about a dagger in your chest. That was not a good feeling. Hats off to Dobbs for making that play and Juwan for going up and getting it. But yeah, that was a tough thing to watch, and obviously it didn't help us out the rest of the year with the SEC East division there. But no, that's the beauty of football, especially big rivalry games like that. Those things seem to happen all the time. But yeah, extreme highs and extreme lows. But you always go on to lace them again the next week. So
wow,
craziness.
So the highs, the lows. One of the highs from that season, your first SEC road game at Mizzou. Drew Lock and the boys. You took the team down, and on 4th and 10, threw what looked like I think it's just a seam ball to a tight end, or do it like a.
No, so that was Isaiah McKenzie, the human joystick. That was our little slot receiver there. We went empty, I believe. We went empty, and they matched it with cover 0. So at that point, it was pick your matchup. I was hoping they would go 0, and they did, because if they had done something else, we didn't have the best play drawn up. It was all or nothing at that point. So yeah, talk about the highs and the lows. We got we called the right play in that situation. Obviously, it could have been the wrong play had they called a different coverage on their end, but we got the look we wanted. Yeah, that was another really cool moment. For my first SEC road game, I had already felt very comfortable in that moment throwing the ball, because I think I threw it 48 times that game. For whatever reason, Jim Chaney was letting me rip it, and it was working. So again, and there was a lot of highs and lows in that game. I remember there was some picks, there was some fumbles, there was a lot of lead changes, and then late, it was one of those moments like, all right, we got 2 minutes left. We're down what, 6? Let's go put this thing in the end zone and make our case here. And that's another one of those moments I'll remember forever. Going. I remember I threw the ball to Isaiah, and then he was surrounded by all of our O linemen. He's a little dude, so I was trying to get in there and get some FaceTime with him. And you see the TV copy. I'm like between John Theus and like Tyler Catalina, like sneaking in there, like So no, Isaiah was awesome. He was my leading receiver that year. I knew if we got zero, which is what we talked about, and they gave us that look, Isaiah had all he had to do was make a guy miss, and the whole middle of the field was open. So I actually underthrew it a little bit. He made a great play on it and got us the dub there. So another great moment.
Yeah, no kidding. So just take us through in your own words, flyover of the remainder of that season, the off season leading up into the 2017 season, and just kind of the events that transpired there. I want to hear it from
Yeah,
the source here.
absolutely. So yeah, we finished out that season in Memphis. We went to the Liberty Bowl, I believe, in Memphis, where we played Kenny Hill and TCU. We ended up winning that one, and I felt like I had learned a lot. I didn't play my best football, but I felt like I had a ton of ground to improve on and a ton of film to watch, and I was getting more and more comfortable each week as a starter in the SEC. And so going into that 2017 year, that summer, that spring, that fall, I knew I was the guy, which was a great feeling. And so there was no like, hey, well, I felt confident that I was going to be the guy. Obviously, Jake Fromm came in and there was a competition, but I felt as a competitor, and I know Jake well, and he won't take offense to this. I'm sure he felt the same way that it was his job. That's just how competitors are. No, I felt awesome, and I felt like this was, I was going to go improve on my freshman year, and just continue with my career and continue to improve. So that spring, that summer, that fall was all just about continuing to improve my own game and not worry about anything else. And I ended up having a great spring camp, a great fall camp, and leading up into that season. Obviously, the first game of 2017, I did my LCL, but that fall, spring, and summer was outstanding in terms of growth and development and mastering that offense and obviously the year we had that year, not to jump ahead, but we ended up making a national championship that run that year, and that was an incredible team. So I was preparing as if I was the guy. I felt like I was the guy. I ended up winning the starting job going into 2017. Injuries happened, but I just remember feeling like ready to light the world on fire in 2017, and then just got caught up a little short. So it was a great memory to look back on because I felt like I very much improved. But that's the thing with this sport, highs and lows, injuries happen.
You obviously have a great attitude and kind of retrospective view on that. Were you able to not be too kind of down on yourself and down on the whole situation when something as unfortunate as a torn LCL that you can't prevent just happens in the first week of the season after a fantastic offseason?
Yeah, it was very frustrating because you put all that work in there, and the time finally comes to go play on Saturday, and then that happens. And it was early too. I think it was the second drive of the game or something. But yeah, disappointment's a great word. A lot of just why. I felt like I put a lot of work in to get to that point, and then that happened. But these are all things that I feel like needed to happen to be able to understand and greatly appreciate what you have when you are injury free and you are playing. So those 8-9 weeks that I was out, obviously I was there every day with the team. I did everything I could. It took some transition time. I wasn't pouting, I wasn't down. Yeah, obviously in my head as a competitor, I wanted to be out there. I wanted to be out there playing and leading the team. So that part was the worst part, just standing on the sideline on a crutch and watching, the guys that you've been grinding with go play. But you're still supporting, you're still offering your tidbits of knowledge where you can. I tried to be there for Jake when he was playing, and he was obviously playing really well. So the biggest thing with the injury was the competitive side of me was down, but that's where I think the teammate side of me and the me rather, or the we rather than me side of me kind of came in, and because that's all I could do. I wasn't able to go out there and play for a few weeks. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, the injury happened, and it definitely changed up my career a little bit, but I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't change it. Had it not happened, I don't know what it would look like, but it set me on a different path. So, um, again, and I haven't had an injury as bad as that after the fact, but I've seen a lot of guys go down, and I felt like, hey, I've been there, maybe not to that degree, but I can offer a little bit of insight for you as well. So the injuries things, they happen, but yeah, oftentimes they lead to insight outside of things you ever really thought.
So, definitely, you said changed your path, and having been committed to UGA since you were a sophomore in high school, I would venture to guess that there was no way that you thought in a million years you would ever find yourself transferring. When did that first become something that you were seriously considering, and what was kind of the thought process and the feelings that came along with that?
Yeah, so I ended up getting back cleared like week, I don't know, eight or nine of that season. It was later on, but by that time we were 9-0, 8-0, rolling on path, to the national championship. So there was a little bit of like, hey, I wanted to play, like, I let Kirby know that, and I let Jim know that, Cheney, and but at the time it's like, are we gonna take the hot hand out and put me back in and switch up what we got going? We're 9-0, so that was a tough decision for Kirby. At the end of the day, he made his decision, and I don't have any like fault for him for that. Just because of the situation is what it is. As a competitor, yes, I would have loved to go in there and play and do my thing, but I'm not making the decisions. I'm not the coach, so that's what that was. And and again, Jake was having a hell of a year. We had a great team, and I so that was that. I commend him for that. But in terms of the transfer talk, like at the time, the rules were obviously different. This is pre-transfer rule. This is pre-NIL. So I knew I was going to have to sit out. And I didn't really start talking about it with anyone but my dad until, the very back half, maybe even, a couple weeks before the national championship, right? Like, because I didn't want to break any rules. I didn't want to be reaching out to teams, and this and that. I didn't want to, have the NCAA breathing down my neck and then make my situation even worse. So I was a rule abider about it, and I also wanted to be very present and focused on, even though I wasn't playing with the team that I was with, because I felt I owed them that, and I owed, I was just like my commitment originally, like I'm going to stay committed with this team while I'm here. My future may be different after this season, but let's stick it out this season and do what we can because injuries do happen. Maybe Jake goes down. You never know. But so yeah, the transfer talk didn't start happening probably till December, January of 18, right around the national championship time, and I remember walking off the field of the national championship, knowing probably that was my last game in the red and black, and just kind of soaking it all in. Obviously, it was a big, we lost the game in a horrible fashion there in the end, and but no, I remember putting my arm around Jake, and I didn't tell him there, but I kind of let him know, like, hey, like you're going to be back in this situation with another chance at it next year. You've done a hell of a job this year as a true freshman. Remember this moment. Go ahead and get it again next year. And that was kind of me telling him, like, hey, I felt like I felt like I knew I was going to transfer, but I just, as a guy who I'd seen go to work with, competed with every day, like, I don't know if it was me reassuring myself, like, hey, like I got to tell somebody, but not really. So told him that, and then after that, yeah, it was a lot of talks with my dad, and then getting on with Kirby and Jim and letting them know, and then the whole process. I can't even remember what the original process of asking for your transfer and getting all the paperwork, and then you can reach out to different schools. But the transfer process was actually easy because I knew where I wanted to go, which was home, which was UW. It was if I was gonna if I didn't transfer, I would have stuck it out. And if I was gonna transfer, I was going to one spot, and it was UW. So the timing there worked out. I knew I had to sit out. Jake was going into his senior year, so what originally didn't work out ended up working out in my favor in the end. Transferred, had to sit out here and watch Jake do his thing. And that 2018 year was a hell of a year as well. Even though I was a redshirt junior, not able to play, ended up being the Bob Jarvis Scouter of the Year up there at UW, and making it a great year. So
talk about what did it feel like to go from nearly as far as you could have possibly gone from home in Athens to this homecoming transfer? You're back in your backyard. You know you're not playing. You couldn't play if you tried, right? Um, that's got to do, I would think, for me, if I were in your shoes, I feel like that would allow you to kind of exhale and be like, all right, this is a reset. This is a year of development. I'm back in my backyard. Like, let's go.
Absolutely. I think you hit it kind of spot on. The original thought of transferring back to Washington was, a lot of it was for that reason. Like, hey, I did the 1,000 miles from home. I did the new thing because I wanted to do that coming out. Part of the reason I went to Georgia is because I wanted to experience something new. I wanted to get out of my comfortability level, get out of the house, and go live life and live it on my own. And then part of the reason for coming back was like, hey, like I've done that. Now let's just focus on football and get to. I want to be an NFL quarterback one day. Let's get back to where I know I can play. I can compete for a job, put out some great tape, and get to that level. So coming back to Washington made the most sense to me because there was going to be no exterior. I know where I'm going. I grew up there. I know the staff very well. I know a lot of the players there. Like that was, to me, in my mind, was my best chance / opportunity for success to get where I wanted to go. So that's really why I did it. Going from Georgia to Washington. Had I not, I even thought about playing baseball at Georgia at one point, instead of transferring. But I'm glad I didn't do that. Looking back, who knows what would have happened? But yeah, no, the Washington made the most sense for me as a transfer because it was the most direct path, and it was what I knew. I knew I wasn't walking into any unknown, and there was going to be no ulterior motive outside of getting what I wanted to get done.
How were you welcomed to that locker room? Was it arms, everyone's got their wide open arms for you, or was it, this is Jake's team, we'll talk to you, next season, or how were you greeted?
I was actually greeted really well. The cool thing, I guess, the cool thing, it's not cool anymore because guys just can go transfer and play anywhere.
Yeah.
The cool thing for me was I transferred and I knew I couldn't even suit up or play. Not that that's cool, but that allowed me to have a great relationship with Jake.
Right. It changes the whole dynamic. Yeah.
So, and Jake's a guy that I'm still very tight with today, and part of that was because we were able to have that relationship aside from competition. Yeah, we still competed in practice, but I wasn't able to even suit up on Saturdays. So, that relationship really blossomed that year. And then the locker room, I already knew several guys. A lot of those guys were Washington high school football guys. I knew a lot of them through the recruiting aspect. So that locker room was amazing, going in there. And that also speaks to the kind of guys Chris Peterson recruits, too. He always talked about the OKG, our kind of guys. So, yeah, there was zero animosity, zero bad blood, all open arms going to that locker room. And we really hit the ground running. I remember I moved in with 10 guys on the team almost immediately, and lived with them for 2 years. So that transition was very smooth. The only downside was having to sit out, obviously, but again, I made the most of that opportunity. I think I took a step in a leadership role once again. Not being able to play allowed me to be a little bit more vocal, whether it was on the sidelines on Saturdays or just throughout the week in practice. And then I was able to really take that scout team to the next level, where I was going against guys, Greg Gaines, Taylor Rapp, Keith Taylor, Elijah Molden, a ton of dudes that are now high quality, NFL starters were all a part of that 2018 defense that I was going against every day in practice. So I don't think I took a step back. Obviously I wasn't getting game reps, but in terms of learning the UW offense and getting reps in practice, I was getting about as many as I could ask for. So it was a great year for me. Obviously I wish I could have played, but Jake did his thing. Both Jakes. I think Hannah played a little bit that year, and yeah, so it's honestly, one of my better years of college, looking back on it. But yeah, it was definitely new and a new experience. And again, all these things, my whole story, it's like I would never go back and change anything because it's led me right to where I am today, and honestly made me who I am. So
I want to hear. So you go, like we said, obviously way back across the country, back home.
Mm-hmm.
You also You went from playing for Kirby Smart to Chris Peterson, who, like, as an observer, two very different coaches. So tell me about,
Absolutely.
compare their two styles and kind of juxtapose those two guys, because those are very different characters.
They're extremely different. But that's that's also a part of the cool thing about playing in two spots is you get to learn and pick up on tidbits of two legendary coaches that coach it very differently. Obviously, the main thing, the goal is to win a national championship and be the best man you can be on and off the field, right? And they both had different approaches to doing that. Kirby was very direct. Oftentimes he'd get in your face. Oftentimes he might say a couple bad words here and there, but at the end of the day, he's doing it because he knows the type of football player and person you can be, and he wants to get that out of you, right? So that was understood. So it was a lot of times it was tough love, but and you'd have those moments. But you go back in and you watch the tape and you go upstairs and talk to Kirby and he'd reinforce what I just said, that hey, it's all out of love. We know, I know what you can be. I know what your potential is. I just, I'm doing everything I can to get that out of you. And I appreciated that very much. I needed some of that tough love, especially as a 16 and 17-year-old freshman who just got recruited like he walks on water, right? So that was very, very beneficial for me. And then when I transferred to Washington, I mentioned the OKGs. That's the kind of guy that Chris Peterson recruited. He was very much concerned with academics and family life and being a man and all that being a man encompasses just as much as he was about success on the football field. So that kind of taught me a lot about, hey, like, yes, football is a lot. Football is what I want to do. It's what I want to do with my career. But there's so much outside of that, too, that I need to also be focusing on and be intentional about. And that's just the kind of guy Coach Peterson was. Two very different people with very different approaches, but I appreciated the knowledge and all the little things that I picked up from both of them. Peterson was not a yeller or a screamer. He was very even keeled, which was nice. It was great for a quarterback because you're trying to stay on that never too high, never too low, next play mentality. But yeah, and I think even having two different coaching styles in college definitely helped me out going into the NFL as well, where I had 5 different coaches with all different unique personality types. So it kind of set me up to be able to handle and play for any kind of coaching style.
You said that you were able to be brought back down to earth after being recruited, treated like you had walked on water as a recruit.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people, I don't know if they realize this or not, but for the non-athlete, it's almost like the recruiting process, for like a Greek life analogy. Recruiting process is like Rush. They're all telling you you're the greatest. You got to come here. Let's go. To then you arrive for training camp for that off season, and that's like pledgeship. It's like reality.
Yes.
Really
Yes.
How did Kirby in particular kind of bring you back down to earth?
Well, I mean, Kirby did a good job of just being consistently. It didn't matter who you were. If you were Nick Chubb, obviously Nick Chubb wasn't making a ton of mistakes or making a fool of himself off the field, right? But it didn't matter who you were. If you made a mistake on the practice field, you were going to get let know that you made a mistake in front of everybody, and it wasn't going to be necessarily like an easygoing conversation, right? So obviously everybody's aware of it. That only that maybe stresses you out a little bit, but it also reinforces the fact that, hey, I fucked up and I'm not going to make that same mistake again. Not for this team, not for Kirby, not for everybody. So that was one way of doing it. The de-recruitment more so came in the spring and summertime when we're out there running gassers, at 5 p.m. on a 90-degree day. I always got, my biggest thing was as a quarterback, obviously, I was highly recruited and everything. They always made fun of me for being a West Coast kid, being in the South, and thinking I could hang with the boys and that. So that was my de-recruitment thing. That was always the running joke there. But I got humbled quick. I mentioned not being able to push heavyweight. We were pushing heavyweight down there if you could or not. And you were running. If you couldn't run anymore, you were still running. So a lot of the de-recruitment came solely from the fact that conditioning and weightlifting and practice tempos were insanely different than what I had been used to. So I realized if I couldn't figure out how to keep up with that, I wasn't going to last long. And then I figured, hey, if I can't do this, I should probably keep my mouth shut until I can, right? So plus, a handful of coaches, getting on your butt and when you do make mistakes. So that's all part of it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of highly recruited kids out there, and there's a lot of different egos and personalities, and I know I wasn't the only one getting de-recruited, and I love the de-recruiting process because of what it does to people, and it's a very necessary thing, I think, in college football.
Oh yeah, I would agree. The de-recruitment, that's good for everyone. I'll take your ego down a few notches pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
So back to Washington. Let's jump in. Jake Browning's gone. You're the guy. What was it like? What was the whole feel of that season? People may not realize Washington, UW, Dog Saturdays, their tailgates, they get after it. It creates a serious college football environment. Just what was that whole season like, and maybe the weeks leading up to it, where you once again knew you were the guy?
Yeah. Well, you made a great point there. That like the people down south, they don't know about the upper left, like the sailgating and the greatest setting. They don't know about it. So it was an outstanding place to play ball. I grew up going to Husky games, and it's a loud stadium too. People always sleep on that as well. Going back to your question, I actually was in a competition going into 2019 with Jake Haener, who was a very good quarterback. He played a little bit in 18 in a couple games. I think he played against Cal in another one. And then all spring and all camp, I was directly in competition with Haener, and Pete made that very clear that I was going to have to earn that job, and it was close. Like I won't say it wasn't. I got a lot of respect for Haener, who's still playing. He's with New Orleans and doing his thing, and he had a great career in Fresno after the fact. But yeah, we were neck and neck. He was making plays, I was making plays. I really wasn't sure which way Pete was going to go up until the last week when he made the announcement. Obviously, when he did that, I was stoked. We opened up the year against Eastern Washington at home. Just a beautiful day in September up in Seattle, and I got to let it fly a little bit. I mean, that experience there, I remember playing, running out in the purple and Husky Stadium. That was really cool. That was my hometown. That was my home state. Whole family, whole town of Lake Stevens in the crowd, and it was awesome. Ended up throwing for 400 and a couple touchdowns that game, and lighting it up a little bit with a little extra pep in my step, just wearing the purple. So. But yeah, in terms of camp in the spring, I was in full competition mode and just grinding it out. And obviously that helped me be a better player as well. And yeah, we hit it running from there.
So again, give us the flyover of that 2019 season.
Yeah, so 2019 started out. It was an interesting year. We won a few good games, and we lost some games that I feel like we should have won. Obviously, you can't go back and change it now, but I was neck and neck with Herbert against Oregon that year, and Utah was really good, and we ended up losing a few of those that I felt like we could have won. Overall, it was a hell of a year. I had a blast playing back in front of the hometown and being back in the Pac-12, and we finished off that year playing against Boise in the Vegas Bowl, and it was a fun little thing because that was Pete's last game as head coach playing against his former team. But yeah, I mean, looking back now, it was a different offense, and it was fun. We had a lot of deep shots going on. I had a couple fun guys. Puka as a freshman, Puka Nakua. A handful of guys on that defense that were young cats then, but now are starters in the league. It was a little bit of a transition year. There was a lot of the guys that like Browning's class were out of there, so it was a bit of a transition year where I felt like we could have done more. We fell short here and there, but at the end of the day, I felt like I had put enough on tape, and I felt like I was comfortable enough with my game after that season to be able to declare and take the next step. So that's what I ended up doing. Again, don't regret it for a second. I didn't have a crystal ball, but had I would have done the same thing, knowing that the next year was a 4-game COVID season.
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
2019 was a blast. I playing in front of the hometown, playing in front of the home crowd, And suiting up in the purple and gold was something I'll always be able to look back on and appreciate and be proud of. So
you were able to put stuff on tape. You obviously had tape still from your early days at Georgia. You're a guy who physically, I mean, you're what, 6'6", huge frame, arm strength, never a question mark there. So checking all of those boxes as an NFL prospect. You go to the combine. What were some of the questions that you faced most frequently at the combine? Both ones that you were expecting, you were like, oh, brother, okay, I got to answer these ones. And some of the ones that you expected less.
yeah, so a lot of the just the general compliance questions came from my experiences at Georgia. What was I doing off the field? What was I, hanging out at Bourbon Street in Athens, past 1 a.m. Those were a lot of those questions, that's standard for everybody. So I had to clean up some of those, which wasn't too bad. And I knew going in I was going to have to do that. The biggest question mark for me in terms of football was because I declared early was, hey, can he process the defensive structure? Can he process, an NFL scheme and playbook? So a lot of it was processing. So a lot of my meetings consisted of, little mind games and drawing stuff up on the board and going through and watching tape and explaining, hey, this is what I was doing here. This is what our protection was. This is what the read was. And this is why I went here. So my biggest question mark, I believe, was my processing skills. And I felt like I made some pretty big strides in 2019, as well as the training process going into the draft and the combine, where I was able to really analyze some of the stuff I put on tape and be able to talk about it in a more intellectual fashion, as they want you to be able to do in the league. So I think the biggest thing was processing, and I felt like I made huge strides in that and was able to show some of these coaches and staff members down in Indy what I was able to do.
Did you have any mentors or older guys who you were able to reach out to and lean on during that period and that process of getting ready for the draft?
Yeah, so I was with Rep One at the time, Rep One Sports, now Excel Sports, and they got 1,000 different vet quarterbacks that they've had come through here. So I remember, not that I was asking a million questions, but I had a couple phone calls with Jared Goff, talked to Ben Roethlisberger, Carson Wentz, a couple guys, just general. Hey, what should I expect? What should this and that? What does this look like? Just kind of got their perspective on their process, and it helped, and it also, I didn't need a ton of that because the guys at Excel and Rep One, formerly Rep One, now Excel, did an outstanding job of preparing me for every possible question that I was going to be answered. Did a ton of mock interviews, did a ton of drawing, ton of tape watching, and I felt very prepared for that week in Indy because of the work I had done going up into it, and then also 3D QB, Adam Dato, Taylor Kelly, John Beck, with the on the field stuff and some of the film room stuff as well, getting prepared for Indy. So I had a huge staff helping me out and get me prepped and ready for anything that was going to come my way. So I felt very confident that week.
What did your draft weekend look like?
So it was a weird one. So it was COVID, right? Because I got invited to go to the draft, but I just wanted to keep it with the family. So we ended up renting a house actually 5 minutes from where I'm at right now. I had a pool in the back. I brought, I think it was 5 or 6 of my best high school buddies down, my parents, my brother, my sister, and my girlfriend at the time. And we had cameras kind of set up all over the house. And we just watched it, and it was awesome. I ended up getting drafted on day 3. So day 2 and 1 and 2 are a little bit monotonous, just sitting there for the duration of the draft on the couch watching it. But when day 3 came, it was incredible. So.
And then when you arrive in Indianapolis took you in the 4th round. First impressions, NFL locker room. I asked you earlier, when you get to a college locker room and you're 17, 18, the guys who were 22 look super old and weathered. What about when you get to an NFL locker room and you're 21, 22, and there are 36-year-olds in the locker room? How does that mesh happen?
Yeah, that was an entirely new ball game for me, and it was like another experience. Like, hey, I felt like I grew up really fast in college as a freshman starting, and it's like, oh, wait, no, I'm going to work with Philip Rivers every day, who has 9 kids and a wife of 17 years, right? Like it's different, It's no longer I'm going and kicking it with Browning and Sermon in the UW quarterback room. I got Philip Rivers, I got Jacoby Brissett and Chad Kelly in here. Like it's a different animal. I remember my very first walkthrough in August. So we didn't have minicamp that year because COVID wiped it out. So we did everything virtually on Zoom. So I'd see faces and I'd see guys in their little Zoom box, but obviously you can't. You know who they are. You know a face when you see one. I walked out to my first walkthrough and guys are just wearing shorts and their uniform, their practice uniforms, and we're doing quarterback center exchange. And then I walk over to the O line and I'm sitting there behind Philip, and I see Costanzo, Quentin Nelson, who was our center at the time. I can't remember who the center was, but then it was Mark Lewinsky and then Braden Smith. Our center was Ryan Kelly from Alabama. Just, 6'7" average, 360 plus, just mammoths. And I'm 6'6", 240, so I feel like But when I walked out there and I saw those dudes, I was like, holy smokes. Like, this is the NFL. Like, this is insane. And, obviously as the days went by and you're in that building 24/7, that becomes normal and you go play teams and there's just huge dudes everywhere. But that initial walking through the into the Indianapolis indoor and walking behind that O-line, I was like, holy smokes, this is the big show. So that was a fun little memory there. But yeah, and then that whole rookie year with Philip Rivers was something I will never forget. Just the personality Philip was and being in that room every day. Hands down the best storyteller I've ever been around. And the fastest. So I talked about processing earlier. That guy had the fastest processor I've ever been around. He was a football encyclopedia. It was nuts. It was a lot. It was a lot to pick up on as a rookie too, because obviously like he was a starter. I'm learning the offense. I didn't have a preseason, so I didn't get a ton of reps, and a lot of my knowledge came from watching Philip, who would do things so fast, and there was never any questions. So I was having to just learn on the fly behind that, and he was so advanced, 17 years of protections, and so I was a sponge my freshman year. Or my rookie year. I showed up. I went to work. I improved a lot. I matured a lot just being in that room and with that team, and so many good memories from that year, and quite the team it was.
Yeah, that's amazing getting mentorship from a guy with 9 kids in a slightly different phase of life than you were in at the time.
Absolutely.
So, and you keep going back to the fact that you wouldn't change one thing in your journey if you could. Like, all of it has gotten you to where you are today, and it's obviously built a ton of resilience into you. It's forced resilience and like building up a callus basically on yourself. Since Indianapolis, you've bounced around a couple of NFL locker rooms. How have you kept that even keel, keep your wits about you mentality through what is such a volatile set of years, honestly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just being forced, not even forced, I want to be here, but just physically going through it, playing 4 years for 5 teams, transferring in college, getting hurt, this and that. Like it all, like I said, I wouldn't change it because it's all made me who I am. And every time something like that happens, I learn something new. So looking back now, it's like, as a free agent, I'm optimistic, but like I'm never going to get down on myself because I know what I'm capable of. I know when I do get a call, I know what I can bring to the table, and I'm going to go compete and do everything that I possibly can to put myself in a position to get that job. So it's not a factor. Like, it's not like that. The confidence thing always comes into question. It's like, are you good enough to do what you're doing? Like, then why are you not on team? There's a lot that goes into it, as we've seen. I think getting beat down, back up, beat down, back up, beat down, back up over time, you kind of figure out, all right, like, what can I control? What can I control in this moment, and what can't I control? So when you sit there and I was literally just texting my dad today. He's like, "Oh, such and such just got signed by here." I'm like, "Dad, I know, like that stuff's happening, like, but I'm not worried about that. I'm controlling what I can control. I know if I get a call, I'm gonna go get that job. But it's just a matter of me getting a call. I'm not going to be down because I don't. It's just that's out of my control. So sitting there and dwelling on the negative is at the end of the day, it's not productive. It doesn't just it gets you nowhere, but backwards, right? So a lot of trial and error, a lot of it wasn't always perfect when these things did happen. Yeah, I was pissed off, I was angry, I'm like, a lot of questioning why. But as it keeps happening and happening and happening, it's like, all right, some of those things I can absolutely have no control over. No, so I will not put thought towards it. I know what I need to do. I know how to handle myself when the situation comes about. So it's really just it's cliche, but it's controlling what you can control and staying positive in your own mindset. Like that's the biggest thing I've figured out how to handle over the last 5 years is and honestly, it's like I've started to enjoy the beauty of the craziness of the unknown. Like there is a lot of unknown out there, but at the same time, it's like when that call does happen or you do go somewhere, there's so much opportunity in that unknown. So it's a crazy game, it's a crazy process, and there's so many moving pieces. But again, like I say, I wouldn't change anything because it's all a part of me. It's all a part of my story, and it's only gonna you know continue to build. So yeah.
Well, that's a seriously impressive and productive lens, I think, to look at it through. Like it control what you can control. The rest is going to happen, and stay ready. I feel like you're doing everything in your power to set yourself up for success, and the rest will just fall into place, as it will.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. So
like I said, it's not always been like I haven't always had this perspective. Things had to happen for me to be able to gain insight on that, and it was never perfect, and nobody's story is ever perfect. I know every guy you've talked to on here is different, so and that's the beauty that every guy's story makes them who they are, and so yeah, you hit it on the nose there. I appreciate you.
No, absolutely. All right, I'm going to rattle off a couple of rapid fire questions here, and we'll take it home. What is one word to describe Georgia fans best?
Passionate.
What is one word to best describe Washington fans?
Loyal.
What is the best bar in Athens?
Polly's. Great bar.
What's the most fun bar in Seattle?
Rhinehouse. Shingletown.
Of the NFL teams that you've bounced around so far, what was your favorite town or city?
I have to say Seattle.
Fair enough. What is one official visit you wish you had gotten the chance to take?
Florida State.
Would you rather play in the baking hot heat like you did down in Georgia, or in a rainy classic Washington State game?
Give me that rainy classic Washington State, baby.
Who is the strongest arm of any QB you've ever played with or worked out with?
Probably Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe you. Final one. This is going to be longer than a one-word answer, obviously. What's one piece of advice you would give to the current number one guy in the country coming out of high school? The current or future, because there's always going to be a number one guy each season.
Yeah, I would say this might be pretty short, but I would say never lose your edge, never lose your desire to get better. Like the job's never done, is what I would say. Continue to work, continue to sharpen your sword, build your, craft. Yeah, that number one ranking, man, it comes with a lot of power and responsibility, but it can be taken away quick. So continue to work, continue to grind, and continue to do the things that got you there, even after the fact.
All right, Jacob, you just dropped a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom in the last hour plus. I seriously appreciate you taking the time. So I wish you nothing but the best in this off season as a free agent, and staying ready and staying prepared, and hoping that phone call comes, and just keeping an eye on the rest of your journey from afar. I'll be rooting for you.
I appreciate it, Brent. This has been a blast, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.